Welcome to the Straight Up 30, where we make policy make sense. I'm your host, Ross Izzard, and today we're going to talk about not policy, but partisan politics and why they're working so very well for the country. Just kidding. We're going to go a different direction, I think. We've got Dick Wadhams here with me. Dick has been in politics in Colorado for 50 years.
Unfortunately.
Which is, yeah, I don't know whether to say that's incredible or offer condolences, but here you are. He was a former state party chair. He's been in that role for a long time. He has worked on probably more election campaigns than we can count at this stage, and has been somebody who I've had the pleasure of working with several times over the course of my career. Super sharp guy, has sort of a really good inside track on where we're going in this state and probably where we've been, and I'm excited to talk about it. So thanks for coming.
You bet.
So maybe we could start with this. I mean, you've been in the game a long time, and you've been around the Colorado GOP for long time.
Yep.
And the Colorado GOP today in 2026 doesn't look exactly the same as it did 50 years ago. So talk to me a little bit about your involvement in the party and how it has evolved or devolved, if you want to use that one instead, over the course of those decades.
Well, Colorado, up until about 10 years ago, or maybe even further back than that, maybe 15 years ago, Ross, Colorado was actually a very competitive purple state. And even before the term purple or red states, blue states came into being, we were very competitive in a purple state. And largely that's because of we were a third Republican, a third Democrat, a third unaffiliated. And those numbers would fluctuate, but basically it would always settle down into that. And because of that, every election was competitive, if you had an open seat especially. But what has happened in the last 15 years or so is that there has been this influx of new people in Colorado. Now that's really slowed down lately, and there's evidence there's even an out-migration. But 800,000 people moved to Colorado from about 2011 till recently. Well, that totally changed the complexion of the Colorado electorate. Now it is 52% unaffiliated, 24% Democratic, 22% Republican. And these people who have moved to Colorado are much younger. They are very liberal socially. They hate Donald Trump. And because of that, they have been instinctively and reflexively voting against Republicans for 10 years now and longer. And so that has made Colorado a blue state. There's no other way to look at it, especially since 2018.
Which is kind of funny because some people don't like to say that, right? There are plenty of people who are like, well, Colorado is really a purple state, and it's not a full blue, but it is. It's a blue state.
It is a blue state. I think it could go back to purple. In fact, I'm not convinced the state is lost forever. I really don't. In fact, I think that the fact that we have 52% unaffiliated voters is an opportunity and not an obstacle over long term. But right now, the deep-seated hatred, frankly, of Donald Trump by the majority of these unaffiliated voters have just really locked Republicans into this minority status. Then throw in the dysfunction of the party itself over the past few years. And it's much different. This is not a competitive state. It has not been a competitive state. I think it might be more competitive in this election, but we'll have to see.
Okay, so let me ask you this. We're at majority unaffiliated.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, there are places in the country where that trend is the same.
Right.
But it's not super duper common.
No.
It's relatively uncommon to see a universe where you have most voters in a state being not affiliated with either party. And so then there's a question underneath that, right? Which is, well, are they unaffiliated because that's the way the political winds are blowing and the tides, and it's because they genuinely, philosophically are unaffiliated? Or are they unaffiliated because they're so sick of partisan politics that they just can't stand it anymore? And it probably varies by the person, but I'm guessing there's a trend line in there.
I think there is. I mentioned that the people who have moved to Colorado are younger. I think that demographic, they kind of recoil at labels and signing up with a political party, even though they've voted pretty strongly Democratic the last several elections. I don't think that means that they have an allegiance to the Democratic Party. But Kent Theory and his group, Let Colorado Vote, did a very interesting survey about 2 months ago where they polled just unaffiliated voters. And they asked the question, are you unaffiliated because you registered at your driver's license station and you automatically become unaffiliated? Or are you deliberately unaffiliated? And do you consider yourself more of an independent? And the vast majority of these unaffiliated said, listen, we want to be unaffiliated, but we really consider ourselves independents. And so that kind of answered the question. But they're very liberal socially. But we've seen indications, Ross, that they might not be that far left on fundamental tax and budget issues. Proposition HH from 2023, that had the backing of every Democratic elected official in Colorado, and it went down by 20 points. Now, that wouldn't have happened if not big numbers of unaffiliated voters had not voted against that property tax increase. What it tells me is that if you can get an issue isolated away from the Donald Trump phenomenon, these voters can say, no, I don't like this. The Democrats are ultimately trying to raise my taxes, and I'm going to vote no on this. And I think that was really significant, and it tells me that down the line, they might not be as far left as we think on those kinds of questions.
Have you seen a change in that, though? Because I hear what you're saying, and for a long time, even when you and I worked together, we were a lot of tax increase conversations, and voters were always socially liberal, but then whenever it was time for more money, they'd say, pound sand, we don't want to do that, right? But then we had Prop FF, the Healthy School Meals for All, which was effectively a tax increase.
It was, no doubt.
Trial run on a progressive tax and progressive tax income structure.
Right.
Then we had LL. Then we had MM.
Yes.
And now we're talking about an actual progressive tax being on the ballot, as well as Senate Bill 135, which is a TABOR-related initiative for education. Yeah. And so we're about to have kind of like a trial by fire over where these folks actually stand. And I'm going to be interested to see how that goes, because I think there are plenty of people who do see themselves as independent. So I'm not questioning the results of the survey. I also think there are a lot of people, possibly including me, although I should be careful to not get myself in too much trouble, who just feel increasingly isolated from the party structure, right? I mean, the parties neither party represents them. No. And then they're just sort of forced to pick between, in their mind, the lesser of two evils, or not vote, which is very concerning. So where do you think we're going next? Like, what would you expect to see from these folks?
You bring up there are going to be a bunch of things on the ballot, but those two are very significant. The progressive income tax, and also what I think would ultimately kill TABOR. I mean, in terms of kill TABOR refunds. The other thing about that poll of unaffiliated, as I mentioned, is that they asked the question, do you like TABOR or do you want to see it repealed? That's a kind of a basic description of the question. 60% of unaffiliated voters strongly support TABOR. So if they believe that bill or that initiative will, or referendum, I guess it is, will take away their TABOR refunds and undermine TABOR, I think it will go down, because I think people will understand that. The progressive tax, same thing. I think people like the concept of a flat tax, but they will be in very important questions to answer this November.
Well, they've actually voted on some marginal decreases to the flat tax.
That's right.
In recent years. So it's all it's really interesting. Colorado is having a little bit of a political identity crisis, I think. And for anybody who's watching who's not familiar with it, TABOR is the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, which is buried in the Colorado Constitution.
Yes. And
it does a whole bunch of stuff, but buried with all of that is the idea that, number one, if the government collects too much revenue, they've got to give it back to you in the form of refunds, and they got to ask before they can raise taxes.
Right. And the government can grow under TABOR, a combination of inflation and population increase. So it's not like it freezes spending forever. But no, it was passed in 1992. It's been on the books for 34 years.
Well, so here's why this matters, right? People have very strong opinions about TABOR.
Yes.
And the reason it matters for this conversation is that it's like a litmus test on sort of where you stick. TABOR has been at the center of almost every major fiscal political
Yes.
debate
No
for
doubt.
as long as I've been doing this,
Yes.
right?
Right.
And it was written by a guy who has an interesting personality, right? And has interesting opinions and is still out there, Mr. Doug Bruce. And there is a lot of fighting around Tabor that is, some of it's related to Tabor itself, but a lot of it's related to sort of the general philosophical soul of the state. It's become like a proxy war, pretty much. And that's why this stuff matters, not just because it's interesting to see if people believe in Tabor philosophically or taxes philosophically, but because it is an indicator directionally of sort of where all of these independent voters are going.
No doubt.
And the answer right now is nobody knows.
Nobody knows. No. I'm heartened by HH back in 2023, but 2023. But this one, Ross, these are really dangerous items on the ballot, and it's going to tell a big tale, I think, this fall.
Okay, so talk to me about the party itself, because there's been a movement in a certain direction inside the Colorado GOP for a while. I am no longer a Republican and haven't been for quite some time because of some of these movements. But particularly on the leadership side and as far as the types of folks who are involved in the party, there has been a pretty significant sea change, I think, over, I mean, for sure the last decade in the Trump era. But even before then, I think it was starting. So what the hell's going on in the GOP?
Well, it did start about 2009, Ross, when with the emergence of the Tea Party, when the that Obama became president. There was a surge of activism within the Republican Party, called the Tea Party. They totally changed the complexion of the activists of the party. I remember I was the state chairman in 2010. And presiding over the state convention, and I asked the delegates that day at the state convention, how many of you are delegates for the first time? Because now normally there wasn't a lot of turnover from one cycle to the next. You had the same people kind of every year. At least half of those delegates stood up, and they were a very positive part of the Republican Party. I mean, we had in 2010 we unseated 2 Democratic members of Congress, unseated 2 statewide elected officials, elected a majority in the Colorado House. The governor's race went south because of Dan Mays and that whole fiasco, and then Ken Buck unfortunately said some things that allowed Michael Bennet to win. So the Tea Party has been around since 2010. It morphed into the MAGA movement in 2016. Although, ironically, originally, the Tea Party folks were against Trump. They did not like Trump. They liked Ted Cruz. But I think this MAGA crowd, Ross, they just have no tolerance for any lack of support of President Trump. It is a lititmus test, and it is a fierce litmus test. If you have any criticism or any concern about Donald Trump, then you are not a Republican, and we're going to make sure that you are primaried and ushered out of the party if we can do so. And that has really been manifested, mostly manifested when Dave Williams got elected chairman in 2023, because he took the party and made it a weapon against anybody that he opposed because he didn't think they were loyal to Trump enough. And that's
just as just as an aside, this is the state party chairman who went to the Colorado Supreme Court so that his name could appear on the ballot as Dave Let's Go Brandon Williams. So if that tells you where we are, that's a good indication, right? So, okay, help me understand. So you've got simultaneously this sort of strange metamorphosis of the Tea Party into the MAGA movement. And now you have to sort of swear allegiance to Trump to be a Republican, or else you will be ostracized and or nailed to an object. And you have 51% unaffiliated whose sort of preponderant opinion is that they really don't like Donald Trump.
No.
Help me understand.
They are isolated into a corner of the Republican Party and of the state of Colorado right now. And the fact is that a true MAGA Republican who also subscribes to the notion that the 2020 election was stolen, the stolen election conspiracy movement in the party is very deep. And then that's kind of exemplified here directly by Tina Peters, the disgraced and convicted former Mesa County clerk who was illegally tampering with election equipment. She was tried and convicted in Mesa County, and she's now in the state prison. But there was a clamor for her to be released and be pardoned, and President Trump has made that a cause of his own, and that has not helped Colorado Republicans. And so right now you have a situation where these people are fervently wanting Tina Peters pardoned and released. They and they think the election was stolen, and it's just a mess right now. Yeah.
So tell me how this plays out, right? We had Dave Williams
Yes.
for a while, which was about the time that I decided that I had other things to do.
Right.
Then we had Britta Horn,
Mm-hmm.
who was there for a while. And actually, for what it's worth, Britta really tried hard, I think, to corral some of the crazy elements inside the party.
She did.
But it turns out that it can be difficult to corral those elements.
Yes.
And so now we have a new leadership election coming up really at the end of this month. What's going to happen? What should we expect?
Well, May 30th, the Colorado Republican State Central Committee will meet. It's about 500 people. It's the party officers in all 64 counties, plus elected officials like legislators, members of Congress, that kind of thing. These 500 people will choose a new chairman, and that will matter in this election because it could become another drain or weight upon the credibility of the Republican Party. There is one candidate, Joe Oltmann, who is very much involved in the stolen election conspiracy movement, and but he uses very inflammatory rhetoric to describe people he doesn't agree with. He has described several Republican and mostly Democratic elected officials as part of the synagogue of Satan. They're all Jewish elected officials. It's Governor Polis, Senator Bennett, Secretary of State Jenna Griswold, the Republican District Attorney in Mesa County, who prosecuted Tina Peters, and then a state senator, Democratic state senator from Denver by the name of Michael Wiseman. I think he's from Denver. He was a state senator. Anyway, he's described these people as part of the synagogue of Satan and advocates them to be tried in front of a military tribunal and executed. It is mind-numbing to think.
I'm sorry, you might have to say it again. So,
the
synagogue of Satan, tried in front of a military tribunal, and executed.
It is mind-numbing that we even think that somebody could even be close to being elected the state Republican chairman, but he very much might be. There are 4 other candidates. Frankly, there's not really a great candidate in the whole mix, but at least none of the others are advocating the execution of public elected officials. So that's how low the party has sunk in terms of the state central committee. Now, I will say this, though. We have to say we've got 3 brand new Republican members of Congress who I think are outstanding. Jeff Crank in the 5th District, Jeff Hurd in the 3rd, and Gabe Evans in the 8th. And then Lauren Boebert, she's still representing the 4th, and Lauren Boebert is certainly a prominent member of the delegation. We've got great leadership in the state house in terms of Jarvis Caldwell, that new young minority leader in the House, and then Cleve Simpson, the state senator from the San Luis Valley. So, it's easy, and I'm guilty of this too, of thinking that the party, there's nothing good about the Republican Party right now, but we really do have some outstanding new young congressmen, some great legislators. Barbara Kirkmeyer is a great candidate for governor if she can win the nomination. She will run a very competitive race. Whether she can win in this very democratic environment, I don't know. But so there are some good things of the party right now, but it gets overshadowed by all this craziness over here.
Yeah, and I wonder how you separate the policy discussion, right, which is important. So what happens with Colorado's tax structure? What happens with TABOR? What happens with education? What happens with housing? What happens there? I mean, a million things, right? And all of those things matter. If you poll on them, like you said, I think that you find that people are much closer on those issues than you might expect them to be. And so you've got the policy conversation happening here. And then you have this sort of wild war going on the fringe.
Yeah.
And it is happening to some extent on the left,
Yeah.
too. We should mention the Democratic
right.
Party is not exactly not on fire either.
That's right.
And so you've got this sort of increasingly partisan, I'm going to use the extreme sector of politics. And then somewhere in the middle is everybody else with all these policy issues that we actually care about.
Yeah.
How do we fix it? How do we, I mean, because the party system is supposed to represent voters, right? And if it doesn't, then what are we doing?
You know, long term, Ross, you know, the ranked choice voting proposal put on by Kent Theory's organization went down 55-45 in this last election. And I supported it. In fact, I was actually working on the campaign on that. But ultimately, it was just too complicated and just too, the sale could not be made by a majority of Coloradans. Frankly, what I told Kent Theory was, listen, 45% ain't bad. 45% of the public said we want a fundamental change of the electoral process. But it does lead me to answering your question. I think that what we need in Colorado is to go to an open primary, top two, go into the general election. I think that would solve a lot of the problems. Right now, the nomination processes in both parties, Ross, are really dominated by the Democratic Socialists in the Democratic Party and the MAGA stolen election conspiracists in the Republican Party. And some of that is because of the caucus assembly process, but I got to tell you, I think that we need to open up this process and have an open primary, top two. And that could be 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans in some districts, which is fine. I mean, but anyway, I think that ultimately that's what will help us solve this control of the extremes that we see right now in the parties.
Okay, so here's the big one.
Yeah.
We're in an election year, a pretty big one.
Yeah.
And there are all kinds of predictions about what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's still early, right?
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to the primaries yet. It's tough to say exactly what's going to happen at this point. I've heard plenty of people tell me that the state is going to suddenly become a red state again in a gigantic red wave.
No.
I think that might be unlikely, but there is going to be an election for sure.
Right.
What should we expect? Do you expect big changes in 2026 or not?
No. Well, let me put it this way. If the wrong person is nominated for governor of Colorado by the Republican Party, the Republican situation will get worse. And I think there are too many questions that linger over Victor Marks, who's frankly the front runner right now for the Republican nomination. I just don't think he's going to sell to the state and throw in some of the weird stuff that he even talks about. And then State Representative Scott Wadhams has been he's very much a very far right guy in the legislature, and he gets off on some weird tangents like saying that there are pedophile sex rings that are running the state capitol, and then offers no proof. I mean, it's just there's one Republican candidate. I am not part of her campaign. State Senator Barbara Kirkmeyer, who I think has really distinguished herself as a voice of reason and principle on the Joint Budget Committee. Whether Barb can win or not, I don't know, but she will run a very competitive race, and she will run circles around either Weiser or Bennett in terms of what's going on in Colorado right now and taking the issues to them. If she's the nominee, I think we can reelect Gabe Evans in the 8th and the other members of Congress. I think that we can hold on to the seats we won last time in the legislature, and it could be a fairly decent night for Republicans given the restraints we have on us. If Marks or Wadhams are the nominee, I will tell you, we will probably lose more seats in the legislature. We will lose the 8th congressional district. I think Jeff Hurd will be fighting for his life in the 3rd, and I think even Jeff Crank will be much closer than it should in the 5th. That's how bad it will be if we have Marks or Wadhams as the nominee.
Much of which is determined by what happens inside the party in the next couple of months, right? Because we're not far out from the primary at
June
this
30th.
point.
June 30th. Ballots drop on June 8th. So, we're not. No, today's March or May 13th. Mm-hmm. Yeah, ballots are going to start dropping less than a month. Yeah. There you go.
But we'll survive, right?
We will survive.
Be okay, probably.
We will survive.
That's good to know.
Yes.
So we don't have the answers, I'm afraid, for the partisan structure here. Like I said, it's not just the Republicans. The Democrats have their own issues. But if we're being honest, the Colorado GOP is better TV most of the time.
By the way, Ross, I should mention, the Democrats are not in that great a shape. There was a poll recently from a very reputable firm that showed that Bennett, Polis, and Hickenlooper are all underwater in terms of their approval, disapproval. It's not like Democrats are riding high in the hog right now and people say, gee, look at those wonderful Democratic elected officials. The public doesn't really like them. They don't really like what's going on in Colorado right now. But then they look at Republicans and they say, you guys are a bunch of nuts. So it's what's going to win out here? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's mostly because they're not talking about the synagogue of Satan. Probably.
There you
that
go.
Probably helps. But so it's going to be a wild ride. It's been a wild ride in Colorado for a long time when it comes to the GOP and partisanship in general. And if I were going to throw out a big macro projection, I think the whole country is moving in a direction that is not in alignment with where either party sits. And so where that's actually going to land, I don't know. But I know we're not going to be bored finding out.
No,
so
we're not.
Break out the popcorn. There'll be a lot going on politically in the near future. We're going to have a really exciting state party election, and then we're going to have primaries, and then we're going to have the general, and then we will pick up all the pieces and glue them back together and come back and attempt to do something that looks like governing effectively.
There you go.
Dick, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ross.
Take care of yourself. I hope you don't jump off of anything tall.
Very good.
That'll do it for today's episode of the Straight Up 30. We'll see you back here next week for another policy issue that matters. Whoop.